fertilizer markets are back in focus as geopolitical tensions add another layer of uncertainty to an already tight global supply picture. While much of the attention has centered on the Persian Gulf, the bigger issue may be just how concentrated global trade flows are, particularly in fertilizers like urea and phosphates. So, how exposed is the market to disruption? And is this really just a regional story or something more structural in the global balance? I'm Johanna Bota, and joining us today is Josh Linville, VP of Fertilizer at StoneX. Welcome back, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me on short order. With everything going on in the fertilizer markets, a lot of stuff we need to cover.
Yes, well, let's start there. There's been a lot of focus and, in some cases, real sensationalism around the situation in the Persian Gulf. But at the same time, the global supply and demand balance for fertilizers was already tight. So, when we talk about disruption risk in this market, it ultimately comes down to trade flows, I would say. Who are the key global urea exporters today, and what makes them so central to pricing power? And more importantly, why is this story bigger than just the Middle East conflict?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When these stories start to pop up, we've all been taught to basically just sit there and kind of take everything with a grain of salt. Oh, they're just trying to get views. Oh, they're just trying to get this. And most of the time it is. And I understand that kind of the irony of me sitting there saying this, and what I'm about to say is even more sensational than what's been being talked about out there. And I think that's a little bit of there's a lack of knowledge. This is a market nobody's really talked about in the past. It's kind of a hidden industry, if you will, and now everybody's trying to play catch up and they're just grabbing what they can. And because of that, honestly, I think they're undershooting how bad this situation is rather than overshooting, which is very odd. And so, the way we always look at it is we look at it from the top exporters in the world because that is what develops the global trade. And so, you guys have seen this before. This is our top 10 list of urea exporters around the world in 2024. This is the most up to date data that we have. And so, we've been talking a lot about Qatar, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Why? Those three countries are either in the war, Iran, or they are back behind the Strait of Hormuz, which we're going on the second week now of that strait being closed down, which basically means those two nations may as well be shut off. And in fact, some of their production is being shut off because the vessels are not showing up. This stuff is not being able to get shipped out. So we've lost those three. That's what everybody's focused on. But let's broaden out the picture a little bit. Let's look at Russia. They're doing okay. There's nothing stopping Russian flows from going, but they're also still in the middle of this war with Ukraine. And what that means is it's a heightened war risk that all of a sudden something could happen and suddenly those start to fall. If they take a step and the world says no, new economic barriers start to be put in place. Those numbers could start to get impact. Now they've got a lot of their own allies, if you will, that are major, major buyers. India is a friend. Brazil's a friend. Those are two of the biggest buyers in the world. So we don't think that that's going to actually fall, but it's important to watch. Numbers two and three, Qatar, Iran, we've already been talking about that. Egypt, well, Josh, Egypt's in North Africa. Why would I care about that? We need to worry about it because the gas that feeds their nitrogen plants, or a lot of their imported gas that goes into nitrogen production, it originates from Israel. What's going on in Israel? They have to worry about counterattacks by Iran. So they're shutting down their gas fields. That, in the past, has had Egypt slowing down or stopping their own production. That's something we need to watch. Luckily, Oman sits outside the straits. So they've been doing okay. Saudi Arabia, of course, they're stuck behind there. And what this list doesn't include is China. China, at the beginning of the year, basically said, we're not going to export until August. And why is that important? They would normally, if they're in their normal rate, 5 to 5.5 million tons per year, they'd be number two or number three on this list. And as of right now, they don't exist until August. Can they come in sooner? Absolutely. Could they delay it past August? Absolutely. If this world situation continues and they want to keep those tons home for their own people. So we're looking at this list. Numbers one, who should be number two or three, number two currently, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. Guys, we're talking six of the 10 biggest exporters of urea in the world right now either have or could have an impact to their export flows. So we do a lot of time. A lot of the industry is talking about this in terms of, well, what does this mean versus 21, 22? How bad is this versus 21, 22? 21, 22, we thought, I'm sorry, we thought we were going to lose Russian exports. We never did. It was the fear of losing Russian exports, and European production did suffer because of those high gas prices when they shut off cheap Russian gas. Today's S&D, today's global supply and demand model is significantly worse from a fundamental point of view than it was back then. The only thing in my mind is keeping this price from blowing right past what it topped out at in 22. Grain prices significantly lower.
Josh, can you help us distinguish between production and export power? So, among the world's largest urea producers, how much output is actually exported versus consumed domestically? And does that change how exposed the global market is to these type of regional disruptions?
Yeah, this is actually where the story starts to get worse. So you look back at that graph that shows you all the biggest exporters, right? Well, that's looking at it from a standpoint of just what they export. That doesn't include what they actually produce on a given year. So I told you China is normally number two, number three. They are the biggest single producer of urea in the world. So fortunately, production rates in China continue to remain solid. There's no problem there. But look at number two, India. India is not on the export list. They are one of the bigger importers because they need that much more over the top of what they produce. And there's a big issue that we have today. India is very reliant on that natural gas coming from the Persian Gulf region. And as long as those channels are shut down, Indian production is currently taking hits. This is the one thing that we're actually worried significantly about. They had just locked up 1.3 million tons of their last purchase tender. We're afraid they're going to be back very, very soon because their domestic production is down, and we could see a lot of force majeure with those tons that they had bought previous. And typically, when India steps in, they're looking for a million and a half ton. Normally, it could be more with everything going on. That is just going to be throwing gasoline on this fire if they step back in. Again, Russia, who knows if Ukraine continues to attack Russian targets within Russian territory, we have seen that include nitrogen production plants. We got to watch that. Iran is in the middle of a war. Egypt, that gas flow coming from Israel is a big deal. Pakistan relies on gas coming from the Middle East. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, both of these sitting behind the Persian Gulf. So, as bad as it looks from an export point of view, it's worse from a production point of view. Again, our fundamentals today are significantly worse. So everybody's sitting there saying it's too high, it's too high. I don't want to sit there and tell you it can't go lower, but there's an easy case to be made that prices are substantially undervalued from where they should be, given all the stuff that's going on around the world.
And if we look beyond nitrogen to phosphates, for example, who are the dominant exporters there, and how interconnected are those supply chains with the same shipping routes?
Yeah, again, the story is just as bad as what we were talking about on nitrogen. I know we're all talking about nitrogen. That's what you do when you talk about the Persian Gulf, but Saudi Arabia is a major phosphate player in the world. So take a look at this phosphate export chart here, right? Morocco, fortunately, they're doing okay. There is some concern with anhydrous being just as impacted as urea is. Anhydrous is a big variable cost input, so that could start to have a little bit of an impact on Morocco. But China's the biggest producer, the biggest supplier, exporter normally. 2024, they were the second because the government is pulling back on those exports. 2026, they've said we're not going to export until August at the best. Could they do it earlier? Yes. Could they just not export at all? Yes, absolutely. Saudi Arabia, number three on this list, they're stuck behind the strait. Can they ship some of these tons through the country out to the West Coast ports? Maybe, but again, you're talking a much less efficient situation. Russia, again, they're in this war with Ukraine. That obviously brings a little bit of a worry there. U.S. production rates continue to be near record low operating rates. So our own production here in North America is suffering. And guys, I mean, we just talked about all five of the biggest manufacturers, all five of the biggest exporters of phosphate in the world have got one problem or another. So we're talking about nitrogen, phosphate, which has already been extremely high. And I'm not saying it's cheap by any means, but this is a bad situation. And I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to be sensational. I do not want people to take this and be like, oh, we're going to $3,000. I want to do this more just to give you a sense of the what and the why everything is happening around the world. We have got a lot of supply points. We've got a lot of production points around the world that are currently being impacted, not just the Middle East. It is a global situation that's going on.
So, Josh, I do have one more question that just came to my mind. What would be the best case scenario in terms of the Strait of Hormuz and everything else we discussed today? And the worst case scenario in terms of timing? Because fertilizers, at least for the US and planting season for certain crops, are already done for one season, but they're going to be needed soon. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe for perhaps wheat and corn?
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Johanna's learning fertilizer. That's a
Oh my
great question.
goodness. So, I
No,
mean,
it's
like, how long can the strait technically be, not I don't want to call it closed because it's not closed per
Right,
se, but it is not being used at the moment for very scary reasons that might happen to the ships.
right.
So how long do you think that we can hold off from having this sort of conflict in the Strait of Hormuz before it really starts impacting prices for farmers?
It's already there. Unfortunately, so the first attack was it's gonna be 2 weeks from this Saturday, right?
Yeah, because we're on day 13
Our
right now of the war. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So our point of view was the first several days we were fine. If we could get this war to a quick conclusion, reopen the strait, the impact was going to be very, very minimal. Prices should come right back down again because ultimately manufacturing plants hadn't really been impacted. They had place to go with their finished good. Everything was still flowing. And yeah, we lost some shipping days, but fundamentally speaking, the S&D did not really change. After that, we were starting to lose ground. And there's no way of sitting there saying, well, how long until it gets bad? It's already bad. It's just a matter of how much longer does it go and how much worse does this market get. Your best case scenario is that we end this thing immediately. And unfortunately, ending immediately does not solve the situation. The reason being that you've got vessels, well, they've got to start running. They've got to start moving again. And they can do that on short order, but that takes time. Number two, there's only so many docks, there's only so many ports that these ships can load at. And it's not a quick process, right? It takes a couple days, get the ship in, get it parked, get it loaded, get it closed up, get it pushed off, and get it flowing again. So you've got all these ships that have been sitting around. Well, now they've got to get there and they've got to start getting loaded. That's going to take time. The manufacturing plants have to get refired. They have to start running again. That takes time. So all of this to sit there and say, we've been stopped for long enough now. Even if the best case scenario is you and I wake up tomorrow morning and this entire situation has gone to the past and it's safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz again, it is going to take a long time for this market to get back to normal. Again, I don't want to be sensational. If that happens, prices are going to come down, but a lot of the damage has already been done. Not just short-term damage. I think this is going to be an impact that we're going to feel through the remainder of 2026. This is going to keep the global supply situation very, very tight, which leaves the manufacturer in complete control of the negotiations. They want higher prices for their margins. That's just what their part in the marketplace. I will tell you from a U.S. perspective, we've continued to say we need about 5.1 million tons of urea. We have got a heavy March. We've done great July through February, but the thing that we're watching now, NOLA urea prices are a steep discount to the rest of the world. We are in danger of losing normal supplies that come here. Vessels that are right pointed here might get pointed elsewhere. And frankly, if we get too much of a cheaper discount or much of a bigger discount versus the world, we could start taking barges off the river, reload them back onto a vessel, and ship them to the rest of the world. We actually saw that happen a couple of weeks ago with Phosphate. A trading company bought up a bunch of DAP barges because we were such a discount, loaded onto a vessel, and reportedly exported that out to another country.
Okay. Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, so I'll let you get back to your work. And thank you to our viewers for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.